Hello and welcome to our FTC Safeguards Rule webinar. This is a learning program that we put together to help educate users on what this new FTC Safeguards Rule is that went into effect back in June of 2023. For those of you that are on this call and wondering, should I even be on this call? I wanted to help you out with that real quick. If you are a tax preparer, financial consultant, you do financing for consumers, or you're pretty much involved with any type of consumer information, especially financial, credit, personal, then this is something you probably should stay around for. If you're in manufacturing, if you're in some other business, it probably doesn't apply. So please stay with me if this does apply to you, and we're going to dive into it a little bit deeper. And if you're wondering why we're doing this, ComTech, which I am CEO and president of, is a 30-year-old company that specializes in IT support, cybersecurity for small and medium-sized businesses. And we try to always bring relevant information to our clients on policies, compliance, and best practices. So let's get right into the content. The FTC Safeguards Rule, as I mentioned, did come out in June of 2023. And I want to go back and do just a little bit of history. We're not gonna go back in ancient times, but it's important to let you know where this came from. The FTC Safeguard Rule was actually created by the FTC to protect the security, the confidentiality, and the integrity of customer information. In other words, they're there to protect the consumer. That's basically it. And this all started actually back in 1999. A lot of folks that were in the industry recognize the GBLA Act, which was the beginning of all this, and it was meant to really modernize the financial industry and get them ready for electronic records. Everything up to that point was pretty much paper, if you think about it. So the FTC was put in charge to implement this, and it went into effect in 2003, 20 years ago. And obviously, the protections and the requirements were all based on the technology of that time. Well, there was a problem. Unfortunately, GBLA was unclear. It also was toothless, which means even if you did have a violation, you didn't really have to worry about it much because they weren't coming after you and there weren't really any big fines or problems anyway. So it was pretty much ignored. And because it was ignored, we ended up with breach after breach after breach, and we're still seeing it happen today. Even in, I know it's healthcare, not consumer credit, but in the first part of this year, we saw one of the largest breaches ever with Change Healthcare, where 1/3 of all the medical clients in the USA were affected. So this is huge stuff. And the FTC, quite frankly, is getting really tired of this. There's hundreds of millions of records being stolen every year, and a lot of times it's due to bad practices. So they recognize that the technology landscape is radically different than it was in 2003 from 20 years ago. So the FTC in December 2021, they revised the safeguard rules, finally got them up to date with modern technology, and picked an engagement date of June 2023 for it to actually go into effect. The next slide I'm going to show you is an eye chart. It is not meant to be read. Just understand what I'm illustrating here. Back in the 2002 edition, this is basically what the law said. It didn't point out much at all. In 2021, when they revised it for this new edition, you can see they went into a lot more detail. And it's actually even much more than this, but they specifically pointed out who this applied to. And it established parameters for good customer data hygiene. In other words, take care of that client data. If you've got social security numbers, birth dates, bank account numbers, etc., you have a responsibility to take care of that and keep it safe. So it not only outlined the correct parameters for keeping it safe, and they actually did a good job, they also created punitive consequences if you fail to adhere to this. And this is where the teeth part comes in. They actually did put some real teeth behind this law. If you do have a violation, it can be up to $100,000 per violation. It can be up to $10,000 per person for board members, CEOs, and owners. So this is interesting. For the first time, they're actually starting to hold the executives responsible as well. And the FTC can temporarily suspend your business license, or if the infraction is bad enough, they can permanently shut you down. And we're also seeing something else. This is all civil, what you see here. But we saw back when the Uber data breach happened just in 2022. I know this slightly predates the law, but it set a precedence here. The former Uber security chief actually was convicted for criminal negligence about how he handled the consumer data. So for the very first time, we're starting to see felony convictions because of this. Again, the FTC is getting really tired of this. If you mishandle consumer information and it gets stolen or abused, and it's proven that you were negligent, or in his case, he knew the problem was there and didn't do anything about it, they're going to come after you. And what that actually ends up being is it can be up to a 5-year prison sentence. So this is serious stuff. Not only shutting your business down, having lots of fines, but going to prison. I don't think we want to see any of that. I will throw a fun fact in here. The FTC does adjust these penalties every January based on inflation. So it could definitely get worse, especially as we see inflation keep rising as it is. So let's take a quick look at who this actually does apply to. I went over some generalities at the beginning, but some of the covered entities are mortgage lenders, payday lenders, finance companies, check cashers. One of the big ones that that sometimes gets missed is tax preparation firms, different ones like that. Now, your banks, they don't fall under this because they have their own set of rules, and you can fall into those categories just depending on where you are. So you may want to speak with your attorney just to make sure. And for those of you that are familiar with this law, you may be also aware of the exemption status, which means if you have less than 5,000 consumer records, you are exempt. The FTC will give you a pass if something happens. But, and there's a big but here, as there always is, that you need to consider. One thing is, if you're doing tax preparation, this is a good example. Say you have a family of 4, that means you have 4 social security numbers. So all at once, you've got 4 out of that 5,000. It's not just one record, you're dealing with 4. So you're whittling away at that number much faster than you may think you are. Another one that is, I think, the biggest but in this case is if you do, maybe you only have 500 clients and you're doing tax prep and you get breached and all their social security numbers get out. You're right, the FTC is not going to come after you because you fall under this exemption, but I'll guarantee you the attorneys on the side of those consumers is not going to care whether you're under FTC compliance or not. If you failed to protect their data, they're coming after you. So no matter what, it's smart to follow good cyber hygiene practices and keep that data safe. So the next thing that usually comes to mind is I'm in the cloud, so this doesn't really apply to me. I may use a service like CCH or one of the others, and they're taking care of me, so it's not a big deal. Well, unfortunately, that's very wrong. You are correct. CCH and the others, I'm mentioning them because they're at the top of this list, but they do have to comply by all of this. They have to show the paperwork and the reporting showing that they're doing all of the right things, but it also applies all the way down to the computer you are entering the data on, or your staff is entering the data on. It specifically says all endpoints are covered under this ruling. So just because you're in the cloud does not exempt you. And one way of thinking about it is, imagine you have a part-time employee that works from home and she uses her kid's computer that does gaming all the time, has no antivirus on it, no security whatsoever, and her job is to input as many social security numbers a day as she can. You start to see the point here. I wanted to make absolutely sure this was clear. So before June of 2023, when this law came out, I actually called the Atlanta office of the FTC and asked that very question. Does this extend down to the individual tax preparers' endpoints for their computers? And they said, absolutely it does. It is a shared responsibility of the cloud provider and of the local company that is doing the data entry. And they want to make sure all of it is secure end to end. So, what is actually required by all of this? Let's take a look. Companies that meet these new guidelines, they're required to do 9 different things. And I'm going to hit them very quickly. These are rather involved, so we don't have time today to go into each one individually and really dig in. But I'm going to hit them very, very quickly. Before we go through the 9 points, I want you to also realize this is a lot of work. There is a lot involved here, and we are available to help and to consult if you need it. So don't feel like you've got to be overwhelmed by this, because it is very easy to be overwhelmed. But the summary points that I created are: number 1, sounds fairly simple, designate a qualified individual. A lot of times folks think instantly, I'm going to pick the office manager, someone like that, to oversee this compliance program. That is not what they mean in the law. They want a qualified individual, someone that understands cybersecurity, someone that understands network flow and where your risks are. So you can't just pick anyone to do it. You can outsource it to a company, to an IT company, or to someone else that's qualified. Number 2 is you must document routine penetration tests and risk assessments. Those are done at a minimum of once a year. More often is preferred, because security is not something you just flip on or buy. It is an ongoing strategy, and there's always vulnerabilities and problems popping up. So that's why constant testing is required, and that is part of the program. So that's a big piece as well that a lot of small companies don't do. The next thing is you have to apply controls. Controls are restrictors, as you could imagine, that control the flow of data, control the security of data. If you were to oversimplify it wildly, you could say, well, that's managed antivirus. Again, that's way oversimplification, but you would have the antivirus would be the control, but then you also have to validate the controls. They don't want to just see the receipt where you bought it. They want to see that you actually implemented it, that you are running the updates, that you verified it's running on every endpoint, and that you have these reports. And these reports have to be created on a regular basis. Because again, security is not something you just turn on. If you bought it, took screenshots in January, and you never did it again, they have no way to know that by November that it's still working. They want that validation. So that's in there as well. You also have to develop a training and auditing program for your staff to teach them about cybersecurity awareness. So many threats are let in because of people. It's not firewalls malfunctioned. It's not that the software malfunctioned. It's people. And if you don't train your people, and audit that training as well, then you just don't know what your people are doing and they're untrained. And quite honestly, if they don't know what a threat looks like, how can you hold them responsible for clicking on it? You never taught them. As we move on, number 6 is monitor your service providers. This is where you look, especially if you're with someone like CCH or one of the others, you are supposed to ask them for their compliance reports so you know they are meeting what they're supposed to be doing. So you not only have to take care of yourself, you have to take care of the people that you're dealing with. So again, they want to make sure it's secure end to end, all the way through, and you're not just taking their word that they're doing the right thing. Fortunately, large companies like CCH and others should have departments that are devoted to this type of thing. They have tons of attorneys and so forth that make sure that they do follow the compliance rules. Number 7, we're almost done. Number 7, develop continuous improvement cadence. In other words, when you do those vulnerability scans, you do those penetration tests, you will find problems. That's inevitable. No one's perfect. Just like if you go in for a health check, there's always going to be something that's not absolutely perfect. They want to see a continuous improvement cadence, so you're taking care of the issues that have been found and you're not just ignoring. They also want you to have an incident response plan. That's different from a written information security plan. In case you're doing taxes, you probably know what that is. But an incident response plan is they want to make sure that you know exactly what to do when something bad does happen. That way, if there is a breach, if data is stolen, everyone's not looking around and pointing in the air trying to figure out, who do I call, what do I do? So they want that documented. And last of all, they want you to provide annual reporting to senior leadership in the company. And the reason for that, I believe, is fairly obvious. If you have an office manager that's fairly tech savvy and they take care of everything on this list, then you're trusting them to do it all, and they're not informing anyone of what was done or showing the reports that it was done, and you're just taking their word for it. And that doesn't always work out to the best. You want proof, so if you do have a problem and they come in for auditing, that you can show the results and show you did your due diligence. So if you're interested in seeing more about what these 9 things do, these 9 points, we actually broke them out into a task list. This is 1 page of it. It actually is 7 pages and 63 different tasks that build out this 9 different steps. So it is a lot of work, a ton of work. And we typically only see the very large companies actually doing this. So the question I'm sure you're asking yourself is, well, how am I handling this? What am I going to do about it? And unfortunately, ignoring it's an invalid answer. We see that happen a lot, especially with the smaller companies. They're like, I don't have the resources or the expertise to do all of this. I've got a business to run. I've got payroll to meet. I just don't have time to do all of this. So they ignore it. Well, there are other options that you can do, and that's what I wanted to throw out here so you can get an idea. One is, of course, you can go in with full compliance, go all in. You're going to do all the penetration tests. You're going to do all the scans. You're going to create the reports. You're going to hire the outside companies to help you in the places that you don't have expertise. Again, we only see this happen usually with the very large firms because it is time and resource expensive all the way around. So for the smaller companies, and this is just my opinion, honestly, as a small business owner myself, is I would say stay off the radar. And that sounds kind of trite, but it really makes sense if you think about it. The FTC, just like most government agencies, is not staffed really well. In other words, they're not typically going to be showing up at every small business door saying, show me all your documentation, and going through and doing an audit. If they do, that would be very, very surprising. But what they will do is if you have a breach, then they're going to swarm and they're going to come in with the microscopes and they're going to look and ask for all that information. So wouldn't it make sense to avoid being on their radar at all? If you do the right things, protect your data, protect your endpoints, and you never have a breach, then you never show up on the radar. So that's really your two options. I mean, the third one was totally ignore it, but I don't think that's a good recipe these days, especially with so many hacks going on. So to get started, you may wonder, well, I'm a small company, what do I do? Well, the first thing that you would want to do is find out what your real security risk is. You need to do an inspection, do a network scan, have someone competently take a look at your network and see where the holes are. Much better to do that now than to wait for a hacker to find those holes, and then you've got a serious problem going. The second thing is once you know what you have, make sure that you implement what is called the Zero Trust Cybersecurity Plan. You may have heard that catchword Zero Trust, and it basically means that you're locking your network down, your programs, your computers down to only what is allowed, and you don't trust anything else out there. If your IT provider has not mentioned that buzzword, Zero Trust, I would be concerned. That is really the only way to protect the network these days, and that strategy came out several years ago. So again, if it hasn't been mentioned and explained to you the importance of it, then you're probably working with some outdated protection. So what to do next? If you are interested in finding out what you have, remember that first step is the inspection network scan. For anyone watching this particular session, we're offering a free bonus. We'll give you a network scan. We'll be happy to take a look at your network. We'll run a scan, see where the vulnerabilities are. It will test your firewall. It will test the computers. It will see, can my passwords be stolen? This is normally a $2,497 value for a small company. Large companies, it has even greater value, but that is something that we'll do for you free of charge. If you are interested in that, contact us and we'll be glad to arrange this for you. It's very, very simple. And we do have non-disclosure agreements to let you know that data is protected. And we typically end up with a report that's easily about 40 pages or more, talking about the security on your network. And then we'll help you make a plan. We'll help you figure out how to fix some of these things so you don't end up on the FTC's radar. Another thing we've got as a bonus with this is if you do request the scan, I'll send you a copy of those 9 critical points with some additional summary information, a copy of the entire document if you really want to read it, need some sleep tonight, you'll get a copy of the entire law, and we'll also include a cybersecurity self-assessment form that looks like this. That form has the basics on it, that you could do a quick self-assessment for yourself without even bringing anyone in and without doing a scan. It's not nearly as thorough by any means, but at least it'll give you an idea of where you stand. So that's basically it for today. If you would, go out to our website at comtechnc.com and you can click the Contact Us button and just say, I'm interested in the network scan, and we're also going to put a link to it down below this video as well. So I hope you found this interesting, and we look forward to hearing from you and arranging your free network scan.